You can't get at the truth if there's some things you can't say. We're a fallible species. We're riddled with biases and fallacies. The only way that our species has managed to discover anything about anything is that some mortal people venture an idea, others say what's wrong with it, and then the best ideas survive.
Welcome to Heterodox Out Loud. I'm John Tomasi, the president of Heterodox Academy. On every episode, we'll be taking you on an exciting intellectual journey, an adventure across the complex and challenging terrain of open inquiry in higher education. You'll be meeting some leading college professors, some heterodox college presidents, and some entrepreneurial students too. Our aim is to give you an insider's view of the complex terrain of open inquiry in higher education, the perils, and the possibilities too. So let's get ready for another adventure into heterodoxy.
Does academic freedom need to have a defense team on campus? Today we'll be talking with a cognitive scientist, Steven Pinker from Harvard. Steve is a founding member of Heterodox Academy and an active member still. He's also a founding member of the Council for Academic Freedom at Harvard. Let's see what Pinker has to say. Steven Pinker, welcome to Heterodox Out Loud.
Thank you.
It's nice to have you here in New York. We just finished a CAP seminar with you, talking about some of your new work. It's great to have you here in the center with us.
Thank you.
I want to talk with you about a number of things, but I want to start by talking about the Council for Academic Freedom at Harvard. And last spring in April, you and a colleague, Bertha Madras, published an op-ed in Boston Globe. They got a lot of attention. A lot of us around the country read that op-ed with real interest and enthusiasm. Can you just tell us a bit about what led to the formation of the council and what's going on?
There are nationwide problems with our universities. There's a widespread impression, to a large part correct, that universities, rather than be crucibles of ideas and debate, are like medieval seminaries subforcing dogmas, and there are certain statements for which you can be censored, ostracized, fired, punished, and that universities are therefore forfeiting their mandate of being places where society gives people the mandate to search for truth. You can't get at the truth if there's some things you can't say. We're a fallible species. We're riddled with biases and fallacies. The only way that our species has managed to discover anything about anything is that some mortal people venture an idea, others say what's wrong with it, and then the best ideas survive. If you disable that process by making some ideas punishable, then you're guaranteed to lock yourself into error, and you forfeit the reputation of the university. And I'd have encountered people, intelligent people, who will respond to my saying, for example, that we have to act on climate change because a overwhelming consensus in science is that human activity is warming the planet. And they reply, well, why should we trust the consensus? Because everyone knows that in academia, if you challenge the consensus, you get canceled.
That's right.
So even when the academics are almost certainly correct, as they are in greenhouse gases warming the planet, we have lost all our credibility because of this culture of cancellation.
That's fair to say that we've been following this at HXA, about the decrease in trust in universities. There was a Gallup poll you always saw last summer that suggested that over the past 20 years, trust in higher education has cratered, cut 47% to something like 28%.
Oh, the majority of people think that universities are harming rather than helping the country.
Yes, which is remarkable.
And which is, we think, it's driven by a number of phenomena, such as exponentially increased tuition, but a large contributor to the increasing trust in universities is often the viral videos and the accurate stories of students and professors being punished often for saying things that are true, such as there are two sexes. That's a true statement. And that drove one of my colleagues, Carol Huthan, out of science, despite the university's self-proclaimed goal of enhancing participation of women in science with an aim toward equity. But if you're a woman who says there are two sexes, you go. That may have been was one of the last straws. It wasn't the only one. There are other cases of mobs rising up to denounce a professor because they found that several years ago he co-signed an amicus brief to the Supreme Court against gay marriage. Another professor had his course canceled because it evaluated the efficacy of counterinsurgency techniques in combating gang violence. There's a long list of things that got people.
A law professor at Harvard who was defending Weinstein, I believe, or something like that.
That is right, who was relieved of his post as a residential dean because he was defending Harvey Weinstein, even though our constitutional system says that every defendant has a right to defense. The alternative being someone gets jailed because someone else says he's guilty. We obviously don't want that. So we failed. It's not just the harm done to Ron Sullivan, colleague of the law school, but it is an abrogated responsibility to educate students and how things work, such as the fact that if you have a criminal justice system where all it takes is to accuse someone, to convict them, and they don't get to defend themselves, then you open the door to untold horrors. History tells us that. Other comparisons to kangaroo courts in repressive autocracies tell us that. And so for Harvard faculty member to defend Harvey Weinstein, as loathsome as he might be, is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It shows that we've got a functioning criminal justice system. The students protest the mere fact that a defendant has a criminal defense attorney. There's something deep that they don't understand about principles of justice.
And can I say something about that? Because it seems to me that those kinds of moments when students would say something like, we don't want the law professor in our school defending someone we think is evil and wrong and should be punished, that we used to call that a teaching moment. It's an opportunity to explain to students what the judicious word for that system means. But there seems to be something new on the block in the last 10 or 15 years for students who hear those teaching moments of discussions. They stick with their view. They don't back down.
Well, the thing is, it's up to teachers to identify and take advantage of teachable moments. They're not called learnable moments. They're called teachable moments because they open up a way for teachers to teach, but we haven't been doing that. Well, then all too often, the administrators have done the opposite of news scares and opportunities. They have basically kissed the student's ass and asses and said, this makes you upset? Okay, well, we don't want you to be upset.
Well, what I want to push you on a little bit is this, and it's something I've noticed, and I'll give an example. New York City Police Commissioner Ray Kelly gave a lecture at Brown University, and which a bunch of students and some people from off campus came to the lecture and they shouted him down. It was one of the first big public shout downs. And when the students who organized that shout down were confronted with the fact they violated the student conduct and said they'd done the wrong thing because they prevented other students from listening and so on, and they're confronted with those facts, the new thing on the block, in my view, was that the students stood their ground. They said that there are reasons for, if you wouldn't cancel this lecture, we're going to cancel this lecture. This kind of speaker puts students of color in danger's way. We have an obligation above your lectures, above your ideas, that justifies us in doing this. And that seems to be something new on the block now. There seems to be, there's sets of ideas that have grown within universities that I think justify some of these actions of students. Does that seem right to you? Or is this something
by justify, you mean really does justify, or that is acceded to as something that is not opposed but ought to be?
I think there's a challenging of the fundamental principles underway. And in the case of those groups of students at Brown who stood proud to say we shouted them down and we would do it again, some of them referred to Marcuse. And there's an essay by Marcuse in 1967 of repressive toleration, in which he talks about the need to defend the oppressed, even against the advocates of free speech and toleration. That toleration and neutrality are masks for power. And there's this critical theory idea that a lot of these liberal ideas of free speech and toleration and neutrality are simply masked for power. And the job of this new generation is to unmask those things and to tear them down.
Oh, yes. So I agree that is widely believed. I think it's a pernicious belief. It's not a belief on which our universities have founded. It's not written into the procedures of our universities, the principles of our universities, or an autocracy. Marcuse was a Marxist, or he took Marxism in his own new directions. But that's not the society we live in, and I'm glad it isn't. And there are good arguments why it shouldn't be. namely that how do we know that what Kunzer is saying is right? Why should we shut him up? Why should we shut up the students who are arguing for Marcuse? The fact that they think they're right is not a good enough reason, because I think I'm right. So do I get to shut them down? And the answer has to be no. No one gets to shut anyone down, to shut anyone up. Ideas, including that one, can be voiced, but they don't carry the day when it comes to silencing their opponents. And in the case of the police commissioner, it's another case in which voicing heterodox opinions is not just a case of a prerogative of a professor or an arcane point of principle. It's not like the famous case in which the ACLU defended the right of Nazis to march in the Jewish community of Skokie in the late 1970s, that we may find the content postures of even Republican, but we defend their right to say it. There are, in the university today, many of the opinions that are being repressed are probably true. In the case of saying what the New York East should do to the New York police, New York reduced its homicide rate by 75% in 8 years. That was an awful lot of Black lives saved who would be dead if it wasn't for them. So this is a case where, far from reinforcing oppression or racial oppression, this saved more Black lives than all the protests put together, what he did to reduce gang violence. And so this is a paradigm case where he ought to be, or at least he ought not to be repressed, if what we care about is the well-being of minority communities. And you don't know whether it will be beneficial to them unless you hear the case being made. You can argue against that.
I'm wondering whether there's something new in universities that we can identify. You've taught at Harvard for a long time. How long have you been at Harvard?
I've been at Harvard for 20 years. Before that, I was at MIT for 21 years. And before that, I was Harvard and Stanford. So I've been in the system for a whole long time.
And so, and yet the Council on Academic Freedom was founded just this year in April 2023. Why then? Why not before? Can you explain? I mean, I follow these things we know about the rise of this. Can you diagnose what's happened?
Oh, it's about way worse. I mean, just as an objective fact, there are far more firings, censorings, sanctions for content of speech in the last 6 years than there were the period beforehand. Foundation for Individual Rights of Expression has documented that, and it's just obvious it includes the university. So the answer to the question why now is it's gotten worse, and in a timely development that was fortunate for us for propaganda reasons. It wasn't the impetus of council. The Fire published its rankings of free speech 5 out of 248 universities.
Yes.
Harvard came in last place with a score of 0. And that we got a score of 0 because they decided not to go into negative numbers.
But now I didn't know that negative numbers part.
Yeah. So
next year, who knows?
We have something to aspire to. That was helpful in answering the question that you just asked, like why do we need this at Harvard? And believe me, it is a ranking that we call to the attention of our new president and our new dean in saying why we are needed. What we hope to do is, first of all, just make people aware of the value of free speech at the university and just why we have it, what it is, why it's necessary. To enforce policies that are already on the books that prevent the harassment or punishment of people for speech, to come to the aid and support and succor of people who have been targeted and then ostracized, which can be emotionally devastating, to when, as so often happens, there are activists who are yammering to the ear of a dean, pressuring them to do something. We're going to yammer into the other ear. So at least they're going to have to think about what's the right decision, rather than just making the trouble go away by trying to placate the noisiest objectors. And we hope to encourage student groups that have a parallel aim and groups at other universities. Harvard has we get asked the question, who cares what happens at Harvard? We're just a university. And there is, I know firsthand experience, a tendency to think far too much of ourselves. But for better or worse, the world cares about that. Absolutely. And so we feel a responsibility to capitalize on that possibly undeserved attention, but at least to make something of it.
Well, I think it's a wonderful thing. One of the lines from the op-ed that really struck me, you in Madras said, quote, "Academic freedom needs a defense team."
Yes.
And that was a really striking line.
Also, this does actually relate to my own specialty of cognitive psychology, where one of the reasons we need free speech is that people are fallible. We're saddled with these brains that are riddled with fallacies and biases. Foremost among them, the motivated reasoning, and we steer our reasoning to a conclusion that we wanted to be true in the first place, and the my side bias, or what we could call intellectual tribalism. That is, we favor whatever position makes our coalition look good. Now, these are psychological phenomena that mean we should be incapable of discovering truth. As it happens, our species has discovered some truths. We figured out DNA, solar system, galaxy, and brain science, and plate tectonics. How do we manage to do it, given that each one of us is so saddled with biases? And the answer is we form communities in which one person can criticize the idea of another.
And do you think the students and faculty members who are skeptical of free speech, who are behind some of these campaigns to fire people, do they deny the things you just said? What do you think? When I said before, why is it happening now? And I said, why form this council now? You answered, because those problems have been rising now. But I guess I think what I mean by that question is, why are the problems rising now? Is there something happening that do you diagnose why the need has arisen then?
Yeah. So in terms of root causes,
that way.
There are a number of candidates. The country, of course, has gotten more politically polarized. Some people blame social media, echo chambers, filter bubbles. But another possible cause is residential and social segregation by education. Increasingly, people with higher degrees of education hang out with one another in urban centers and university towns. People with less of an education live in the outer suburbs and rural areas. And the institutions that used to cross social classes, which more and more now leads educational classes, like army, like churches, like service organizations, have weakened. So people just are in social circles where everyone thinks and feels so.
I'm thinking of Charles Murray's Coming Apart, which is a controversial thinker, obviously, the reason what we just touched on, but that's one of his main theses, right? That we're divided as society based on that factor.
Absolutely.
So that's a contributing factor.
Yes, contributing factor. There's also some legal mandates that have had the perhaps unintended consequence of restricting speech, such as the criterion of a hostile climate for Title IX, that it can be actionable. You can sue a company or a university if not just if they're overt acts of discrimination, but just if the climate is unwelcoming to women or minority groups, sexual or racial minorities. And that opens the door to all kinds of policing of speech, which contribute to climate. There's the burgeoning bureaucracy supporting the climate, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and the mushrooming bureaucracy in universities of bureaucrats empowered often to clamp down on speech or to apply filters such as diversity statements and job applicants to wean out people who don't conform to a particular ideology and a particular set of factual beliefs. There were intellectual kernels back from when I was a student in the 70s, such as Herbert Marcuse, and the idea that speech and knowledge are actually just pretexts of the powerful to suppress other people. Wedded to postmodern epistemology, there's no such thing as objective truth. There's no such thing as objective truth. All the reasons that I gave for the courage of freedom of speech, namely that's the only way we can attain the truth, should go out the window. If there's no truth to be attained with just warring dogmas, and let's just make sure that our dogma has more muscle than the other person's dogma, then free speech has nothing to do with it. And so the ascendancy of those ideas, particularly the academic humanities, means that they're kind of congenial to repression of speech. There may be there is an external exogenous cause that you can identify that perhaps once this idea took hold, started with Cephalades, And because academics can hire their own, out of point of the realm of academia is prestige. What is prestige? It's the Professor X saying Professor Y is okay, Professor Y saying Professor X is okay, and there can be a self-reinforcing system of bubble, really, of unchallenged beliefs.
Or even a targeting of certain ideals or departments that people try to turn in a certain direction to make these ideas more prominent. Maybe a theory more prominent, for example.
Yes, and it can be self-reinforcing as they refuse to bow, refuse to admit fully into submission anyone who disagrees. So the idea, once having gained a toehold, might take over because of the lack of external inputs to the intellectual content of scholarly inquiry.
When you and your colleagues launched the council at Harvard, you mentioned a report from 1990 of the Harvard Free Speech Guidelines as a touchstone for your ideas, and you quoted from the very beginning of that. I have a copy of that right here with me. You quoted from the very beginning of that report, where the report writers say, quote, "Free speech is uniquely important to the university because we are a community committed to reason and rational discourse. Free exchange of ideas is vital for our primary function of discovering and disseminating ideas through research, teaching, and learning. Curtailment of free speech undercuts the intellectual freedom that defines our purpose, defines the purpose of the university."
Yeah, and it's not just because, we like being free, it's fun to be able to say whatever you want, but there is a rationale, which we've spoken about this conversation, namely, that's our species' only means of attaining.
In the same report, at the very end of the report, section 7, they recommend the creation of something they call an advisory committee on free speech. And they suggest that there should be formed at Harvard some kind of a student, I'm reading it now from the report, quote, "A student faculty advisory committee on free speech should be established by the faculty council. And the purpose of that committee would be, they list two purposes: to discuss ambiguities which may arise in applying the guidelines of free speech through time, and also to introduce these values to new generations of the university community," which are ideas that I think that in an op-ed describing the rationale for the creation of the council are similar to these ideas. But was there ever an advisory committee for free speech formed in 1990 or before the council?
Not that I know of.
I've never heard of it.
Yes, no, and we weren't panels to serve that function, but that's, in a way, that is what we're stepping into. And very few people are aware of this policy, which was voting, in fact, is binding, and it is something that we can point to. We might need to just updating it, but it means that even though as a private university, Harvard is not subject to the First Amendment, but if there is a policy, then the policy has to be followed or changed.
And so when the council began last April, there were 50 members. But HXA has always been proud to say that Harvard was, for many years, the place where they had the most members. 53 members of the Harvard faculty are HXA members. But not every member of the council is an HXA member. You are, for example, your co-author, Bertha Madras, is not current. I'll have to call her after this. You have a good sign out on social side. But so you started with 50, but you've grown.
Yes, I spent remarkable. We're 160, perhaps.
And is that faculty?
Yes.
So that's a remarkable achievement. So 160 Harvard faculty are joining into this council.
Yeah, it's still a minority, and there are kind of age and sex and discipline gradients, which we would like to level.
Can you describe what those are?
More older faculty than younger, more in the sciences and medical school, also the humanities.
Interesting. Interesting. Can you say anything about that?
Well, so by far, the humanities are the source of, certainly, of the postmodernist mindset that eliminates a role for free speech and taking truth, and there's no such thing as truth. And that is more likely to see any kind of discussion of criteria of argumentation, of reasoning, as just pretexts to power. So naturally less sympathetic. But also there's another association that we would we take pains to avoid it is in people's minds, and that is between free speech and the political right.
That's right.
I think there are very few people on the council would identify as conservative. There are a couple, and that's because there aren't any professors who identify as conservative, or at least the ones that are all in their 90s, which is itself is a problem, as I don't have to tell you.
Yeah, we all I don't know
of all people. But of course, in academia, as I put it, the academia is at the left pole, just as when you're at the North Pole, all directions are south. When you're an academic, all directions are left. Or right, I'm sorry. In the left pole, all directions are right. And people who are classical 60s liberals are now thought of as conservative by the standards of modern progressive intersectional critical theory, social justice, politically correct ideology.
That's right.
Now, there's also the fact that the threats to academic freedom from within the academy largely come from the left, whereas the threats from outside the academy largely come from the right. Largely in southern states of Florida and Texas. But when it comes to academics censoring academics, it's these are left-wing academics, and it's censored before it seems a bit less left.
And so your experience at Harvard and MIT and before at Stanford and other places, these trends of ideological conformity on the political dimension, political axis, they've been getting worse and worse. At least the imbalance is growing worse and worse. Is that part of the explanation for why this eruption of anti-free speech behavior is happening on campuses?
Yeah, I think so. Also there's another point that I make in our op is that free speech is cognitively very unnatural. It doesn't deserve to people. It needs constant defense. Otherwise, we backslide into orthodoxy. Because what is natural, this is well established in cognitive psychology, is the people on my side are self-evidently right. The people who are on the other side are spreading dangerous falsehoods. Therefore, for the good of society, we have to shut up the people who are obviously incorrect and immoral. Now, of course, the people on the other side say the same thing with side switch. And if you a little bit of wisdom, if you can dislodge yourself from your own vantage point and look down on yourself as a human being, you realize, hey, I'm not an a-hole, and I do believe these things, but they're wrong. How will I know I'm wrong unless I hear other opinions? But that does require a campaign of persuasion, which I think we've been remiss at doing. The old arguments for free speech are ones that have been built, and no one bothers making it anymore. Now we're trying to change that, and it is changing.
Yeah, I think there's a sense that scholarship is in some sense an unnatural practice. That good scholarship, we're actually thinking about ideas, checking our premises, challenging ourselves, is not natural to human beings in all kinds of ways. You much rather go with the group,
especially when it comes to scholarship that meets the idea of disinterested truth that may not be your current pet beliefs. Richard Feynman had a famous saying that above all in science, you must not fool yourself because you are the easiest person to fool. So knowing that bit of meta-awareness of oneself as a fallible thinker, which doesn't come naturally, but what comes naturally is, I'm obviously right. And it looks right to me here inside my skin. And it's the cognitive leap to get out of my skin that makes me create space for people who disagree with me.
One of the things that when Alpha came out, there was a bunch of responses. Obviously, people were extremely interested in what's happening at Harvard and what motivated the group of you to do this. One of the really striking pieces that I read in the wake of that was an op-ed published by the Crimson editors that was kind of lukewarm, I might say. That might be generous, a little bit critical, I think, of the announcement, surprisingly enough. And you may not remember, it's probably lots gone by since you published that piece last spring. But I wrote down a couple of things that the editors said. They called out a line that you just mentioned a moment ago from the op-ed, where you and Bert, that says something like, "When activists shout in the ears of the administrator, we will speak critically, calmly, but consistently and forcibly in the other ear." And the editors of the school paper, they called that out. They said, activism and academic freedom should be seen as allies, not enemies. Which does come an interesting point, Matt. What do you make of that idea that activism and academic freedom should be thought of as allies rather than adversaries?
Well, in practice, they could be allies. In practice, they often have been adversaries because the activists who are trying to shut down the people who disagree with them. So obviously not all activism. And many activists have also been free speech advocates, Martin Luther King and many others. But there is a strain of stooped activism that believes that part of the activism is to shut down the people who disagree with it, or to bully and coerce deans and presidents into knuckling under and acceding to their demands, which all too many presidents and deans have done. Because we think it hasn't been an adversarial process of someone speaking into their other ear,
right?
Saying, this is another contributor to the phenomenon. As universities, the phenomenon of weakening of free speech protections is that it's often been noted that the university has become more corporatized. The person in charge, the president, often has not been a vanguard of university values, but rather of university image and bottom line. How do we protect our builders? How do we stay out of headlines? In fact, it's been remarked that it's the chief counsel who really runs the university, not the president. And I've been shocked at how weak-willed and intellectually flabby the responses of university presidents often has been to these pressure campaigns, rather than saying, "Look, just because this is your crusade doesn't mean you get to get your ways. To have to persuade others. No, you can't scream obscenities into a professor's face if there's something being said that makes you uncomfortable. No, we don't have the right not to ever hear an opinion that makes you feel bad." Basic principles of grown-up discourse, but the presidents and deans haven't made them, partly because they just want to make trouble go away as quickly as possible, partly because they've been often promoted from the ranks of their have the administrative competence. They've previous ability. They presently chair a department in some particular field, but there's no selection for ability to think clearly of the mission of the university in the 21st century. Why we have a university, how ought to run this more custodial management, increasing the endowment, keeping out the negative headlines.
And so that corporatization of the university, it seems like yet another factor, where we're collecting factors, you and I, that might be explaining why these things are happening. One might be an increasing demographic drift towards an ideological conformity across the faculty. Another is a set of ideas rising from a new generation of students, taking some of these Marcusian points and postmodern points very seriously. And now there's a third piece, perhaps, something like a corporatization of the university and the role of the university president. On that last point, is that a new phenomenon? I mean, haven't presidents always been sort of weak-willed, or am I not thinking of that correctly?
Yeah, I shouldn't. I, of all people, should not be too nostalgic about the past. There used to be highly outspoken university presidents, of which John Silber may have, longtime president of the EU, just would deliberately hope H2 may be going too far. But Robert Hutchins, University of Chicago, and
Bob Zimmer.
University of Chicago.
Who stands out by contrast, Glass? Who stands out?
Quite right. But the age of university presidents as public intellectuals, I think that the heyday of that was decades ago.
I recently had Palma Canelos on the show, who is the president of the University of UATX, to talk about some of these early struggles they had with our announcement and some of the controversy they were involved in very early on. One of the interesting developments at UATX that I've been following, that I'd love to get your take on it, concerns this novelty that they're developing recently over the past year, I think, of not waiting for the virtuous president to arrive and fix the university, but rather to try to develop an institutional structure that protects free speech. Have you followed the Judicial Council idea, Austin?
Yes, I think that is a valuable innovation.
And so let me describe it for our listeners who may not know it. So one of the ideas at Austin is to have a set of basic rights and freedoms established in a kind of a constitutional structure. And then the innovative feature is to have a quasi-independent judicial board or a judicial body that any complainant who feels that his or her free speech rights or due process rights have been violated can take the complaint to that board, and that board can override the president's decision, override any policy at the university because it's defending the rights. So it's separation of powers based on the American founding.
Yes.
And I find that Neil Ferguson came up with that idea, as I understand it. And whether they adopt it fully is yet to be determined, I think. But it's kind of a striking idea. It suggests that what it shows me is that every university in the country is sort of saddled with a situation where we're all relying upon a virtuous president to arrive and to stay virtuous despite all the counter-incentives. Austin's taking a different approach, building in this institutional structure. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think that's one of that is a truly constructive role of startup universities, is to expand our mental universe of governance structures and everything else in the universities, because universities have gotten locked into a particular bottle of governance and everything else, partly because they all are part of this kind of or reciprocally grooming community where the criterion for so-called excellence is just the subjective judgments of other so-called excellent people, and we can get a kind of a folie à famille of a bunch of people all saying how everywhere the others is prestigious, and anyone who disagrees is not prestigious, and you keep them up. They're not up to our standards. So some way of just breaking that, breaking into that crystal, that bubble, have some kind of same kinds of checks and balances that we do have in legal situations. I think it's a great idea. And others. I think I did have some criticisms, and Bob Zimmer was also on the board, also was only around the same time. I remember. I think they are, I'm more sanguine about it, both because I've been, the rot of the legacy universities has become more apparent to me recently, and any alternative ought to be encouraged, but also because I think they have been, dealing with some of the initial growing pains. I think one of them is you must not allow the ideal of free speech to be conflated with the political right. That they stacked it much too much with the right way figures. I think that providing a kind of lifeboat for canceled academics is not the same as building a program of the best possible academics. That's right. I think the problem with all startups, educational startups, is what to do about science. That I don't think you can be an educated person in the 21st century without science. How do you attract the smartest students? Science needs labs. Labs need a lot of infrastructure, government grants, committees for the protection of human subjects, animal subjects. So there's the problem of how you provide a science education without having to replicate a lot of the apparatus established in the university.
Yeah, it's certainly financially it's a formidable undertaking to start in the university, especially a great university like they're trying to do.
Maybe in partnership with the science faculties of nearby universities. But anyway, I do wish that well, and I've been involved in other startups like the New College for the Humanities of London. My friend Stu Costin ran the Minerva project in San Francisco. So I think it's good for there to be competition. I think they're good to be alternative models to find out.
Nice. I want to go back to the Council on Academic Freedom and talk a bit more about what you're doing there. So Harvard launched the Council for Academic Freedom in April. Heterodox Academy, a month or two earlier, started organizing a new initiative of campus communities. So as you know, we're a membership organization with one of our active members, with now over 6,000 professors all around the world who share these values. We're a growing organization. One of our innovations over the past year is to start gathering our professors on campuses together into communities. We call them communities. You call yours a council. We'll probably be working on a network that connects various councils and communities across the country and beyond in the near future. I'm just interested in the kind of activities your council might undertake. And I read the op-ed last night in preparation for this interview, and you were just beginning it. But I found 5 different activities that you mentioned in that op-ed as things the council might undertake at some point. I'll just read them out as I read them. So among the things the council might do you said, include workshops on academic freedom, orienting new faculty to the importance of free speech at Harvard. 3, adopting and enforcing policies that protect academic freedom. 4, providing collective support for individuals who are targeted for protected speech. And 5, during moments of crisis, speaking to the administrators of their ear, and calmly, deliberately, and forcefully, as you put it. Have you begun any of these things? What's happening on campus? Actually, started. You've been building, which is just remarkable. And I just want to really emphasize this, that you were able to go from an initial group of 50 to 160 within a half a year.
Yeah,
is truly a remarkable and a newsworthy accomplishment. Beyond the building the numbers, what have you done to build the numbers? Teach me.
We did have a lecture on academic freedom by my colleague Nepal.
Nice. For faculty?
No, open to the community, and that we plan to have one a semester. We have.
You had that last spring or
last earlier in the fall.
And so was that it was for the purpose of people understanding the importance of free speech, of course. Was it also a recruiting tool? Were you thinking of it that way?
Indirectly. But we don't, since we are academics, we want to go beyond just saying, free speech rocks, or, free speech. What is free speech? And it isn't just free speech in the sense of you can shoot your mouth off about anything, but also a culture of civil discourse. And that's one of the things that all emphasized in this lecture. And that was another one of our aims, that you should be able to have a conversation over matters in which you disagree without calling the other person a bigot or calling them a censor.
So you used the word civil, then you used the word constructive. Those are different things, right? We can have, isn't our aim in the universities to have a special kind of speech? It's not just free speech for any purpose. There's reasons why the First Amendment protects all kinds of speech. Speeches that's intemperate, sometimes false, misleading, all kinds of speech can be protected by the First Amendment. But at the universities who care about a certain kind of speech that's aimed at pursuing truth, the civility and important. How important of a value is civility?
Yeah.
Is it the same as constructiveness? I'm not sure.
It's not identical to it. It's arguably a means to the end, in that since it's the ideas that we're pursuing, but we are primates, and we inevitably engage in dominance contests and aggressive displays, that kind of get in the way of pursuing the truth. So to the extent that we keep it civil, which has its own virtues, but that is also a way to make sure at least primate dominance displays don't get in the way. Now, it can't be right in emphasizing they're not the same, because at some point you don't want to be so civil that it's just rude to disagree with someone. And as we well know,
that's right.
Even academic debates that we don't want to disperse can get, as I say, heated. They can get personal. There's nothing that we're going to be able to do, about that in terms of legislation or policy. We can't, pass a law saying you've got to be nice. I think that's something more that Heterodox Academy can foster and encourage. But when it comes to kind of policy and enforcement, they're obviously very hard to enforce.
Let me just say that HXA, we have something called the HXA way, a set of norms, that cultural norms we want to encourage in the universities. Being nice is not one of our norms. It's fine to be nice. We try to be nice people.
I'm Canadian.
So but among the norms are things like make your case with evidence.
Yes.
Show some humility.
Yeah.
Be where you might be. All those kinds of norms that again are compatible with sometimes kind of tough conversations. I've heard many and been involved in some myself that are in the heat of the conversation, tried to make a point. You don't always defer. I remember when I first arrived at Brown, we invited Martha Nussbaum. I invited Martha Nussbaum to give a talk, and I was talking to an older colleague at the time, and I said, "So, who should be the respondent to give critical remarks to her paper?" And the respondent, who was a generation ahead of me, he said, "Well, that would be rude to have someone criticize her, distinguished speaker." I said, "Well, wait a minute. That's why we're here, right? We're not here just for civility. Civility should be part of what we do, of course, but we're here for robust challenges, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's a kind of respect to show it."
Yes, that's right. And civility has to allow for that. Strong disagreement. But but without the distracting personal invective, ad hominem argument, arguments from authority, and so other distractions from the overarching goal of understanding the world of truth.
And so when we think about HXA and the communities that we're building, we talk to our leaders to think of themselves on these across three terms. So we want them to be experts about open inquiry, exemplars of open inquiry, and advocates of open inquiry. And we think of those as kind of a stage evolutionary process. So our idea is you don't hook the academics who you want to have meeting your communities, your canvas councils, by trying to get the advocates out there first and foremost. Some of them will be effective, but it's also a certain personality type who wants to go out there and challenge people. But rather, the first and the easiest step, perhaps, is to encourage people to be experts, to become experts. And so the experts, then exemplars, and then more perhaps publicly they can advocate. Does that resonate with you? Yeah, how many you said a few minutes ago about not getting people to go out there? You didn't say bang pots and pans, but that's kind of what I heard you say. You're not trying to get rabble rousers. You're trying to attract people to seriousness who want to learn more about open inquiry, who want to renew the tradition. Is that?
Yes, and absolutely.
At the Center of Academic Pluralism here in New York, we do a weekly seminar where residential fellows and visitors come together to talk about issues of open inquiry. In today's session, Steve Minker came and talked about his new book manuscript called Don't Go There, Common Knowledge and the Science of Harmony, Hypocrisy, and Outrage. We just finished that conversation, you and I. Can you tell us a bit about what common knowledge is and how it plays into this?
Yes, common knowledge, in the sense of that I've been studying and that I'm writing about for my next book, is a technical concept from logic and game theory that refers to everyone knowing that everyone knows something, which is logically and in many ways different from merely everyone knowing something. So
it's social. It's deeply social.
Yes, it's social.
So epistemic.
Yes, it is social epistemology in the sense that you are aware of other knowers and you know what they know. So, and in particular, ad infinitum, you know what they know about what they know about what others know or what others know. It sounds like an exotic concept, but I have argued that it corresponds to our gut intuition that something is public or out there, that the difference between something that is whispered about on the QT or hinted at through euphemism in innuendo and something that is blurted out, that's in your face, that everyone knows about. And a lot of phenomenon in economic and political life are driven by common knowledge, like our conventions, like using paper currency, driving on the right, are all things that work out because we can expect everyone else expects to obey them, like driving on the right, or accepting a piece of paper in exchange for something of value. You do it because you know other people will in turn accept it. Why would they do that? Because they know that other people in turn will accept it. Unless you have hyperinflation, where common knowledge that it's valuable is challenged, and then they become beasts of paper all over again, worthless. So that's an economic phenomenon, and I suggest that it underlies a lot of our interpersonal social phenomena. It's why we use so much euphemism, innuendo, connecting with dots between lines, rather than blurting something out when we want to prevent something from becoming common knowledge. We know that other people know it, but we don't know that they know that we know that they know it. That often preserves social relationships. And it also drives cases where people can collectively recognize that something exists or is a problem and act together to deal with it.
So it allows for common knowledge allows for cooperation, coordination.
It is what is necessary for coordination, defined as people making complementary choices that benefit them both.
So common knowledge can have dark sides and bright sides. Can you connect common knowledge, the phenomenon of common knowledge, to cancel culture?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the shaming mobs that result in cancellations, either by pressuring a leader to accede to the mob and make the mob go away by canceling the person that has caused the outrage, and the what happens to the person who's being canceled, and everyone knows they're being canceled, come from the fact that norms in a community are knowledge and they're enforced by common knowledge. That is, there's some things that you decent people so don't do. That only works if everyone knows it, and everyone knows that it knows it. If someone reaches that norm, particularly in public where it's common knowledge, they insult a racial minority, they violate a sexual taboo, then that challenges the norm if it's done in public. That is, it's common knowledge, and it sparks the need to punish it, to safeguard the norm. And the punishment also has to be common knowledge, so that you know that everyone knows that it has been punished, and therefore the norm it survives that breach. And so in academia, we have, unfortunately, a number of beliefs that have become moral norms. That's not what we're in the business of doing, is maybe making it moral to believe some factual matters and immoral to believe other factual matters. What's true is true. The truth can't be racist. But we have slipped into a norm system that depends on affirming certain factual beliefs, triggering this urge to punish people who challenge it. Now, this very human response.
And by the way, challenges means ask a question. Can you ask a question?
I mean, it could. But in the case of what we call cancel culture, it doesn't. What it means is censoring the expression of the opinion, punishing the person expressing it. So this whole dynamic of reinforcing social norms by collective punishment runs afoul of the norm of challenging beliefs in order to find out which ones are true or false. Because some of the beliefs you challenge may be ones that are symbolic talismans or moral talismans in a community. Such as that there used to be that men and women are indistinguishable, that we're all like slaves, but all sex differences come from socialization. Someone bizarrely, we now have a different one, that there are no such thing as men and women, that they're nothing but the stereotypes that the last generation tried to eliminate, that a woman is someone who wears long hair and a dress, and that being a woman has nothing to do with chromosomes and hormones and gametes.
Which is the set of issues that Carol Rubin and others have had such difficulties with. I want to ask about, in the seminar just now, we were talking about cancel culture and the connection to common knowledge. Let me just turn it, as we close here, I want to invite you to think with me about common knowledge, harnessing common knowledge for the cause of academic freedom on campuses. Is there a way to build a culture of, I'm going to try to formulate this, I'll need your help, to formulate a common knowledge culture of academic freedom, of the idea that there's a common sense understanding what a university is. I know what it is, you know what it is, I know that you know that I think it's this thing. That is a special place where you come to have conversations and to learn and to grow and to experiment. Is it possible to use some of the common knowledge machinery and insights to help us think about how to reform these universities? What do you make of that?
I think so, in the sense that there are a lot of the cancellation campaigns seem completely innocent of the very idea that there is a virtue of academic freedom. Just doesn't, it's self-evidently doesn't occur to them. Otherwise, they think twice, so at least they would justify it in terms of why the cancellation outweighs the value of academic. In case they don't even do that, because knowledge and academic freedom just isn't out there as a concept. So just making that, it made me futile to get everyone to sign on to it as a supreme value. But at the very least, they'll know that it is widely held. It is nominally what universities are committed to. Therefore, if they're going to try to float it, being better articulated their reason, which in the past they haven't done. I mean, most often you can't do it, and so why they haven't done it. But in addition, they haven't done it because it hasn't occurred to them that it's an idea out there that has to be acknowledged.
So I'm just interested in this idea that we could try to think about. I basically say we care about culture, academic culture, but not just having free speech rights, important those are on campuses, but also building the habits of mind, the kind of policies that encourage these ways of thinking. Are there ways to does the council at Harvard, for example, have on its agenda or its radar screen the idea of trying to change the culture of Harvard over time, slowly. Do you have any thoughts about that?
It's obviously harder to do because a culture is a grassroots phenomenon. It's a wiki anyone can contribute. It has a network effect. Sometimes things can ripple freely and become viral.
But institutions matter. Institutions and other policies or institutional changes that might support the kind of culture, the kind of common knowledge culture that we might like at a place like Harvard.
Yeah, so there certainly are policies, and I think they can give a nudge to the culture. Policies like we're advocating for the university to adopt the Calvin principles from the University of Chicago.
These are the principles of university neutrality.
Yes, Calvin with a K. We would like the university to get rid of mandatory diversity statements at the end of job applicants, which can serve to either turn a whole generation of job applicants into liars, or weed out anyone who disagrees with a certain narrow orthodoxy.
They simply don't force political speech.
Exactly. I mean, now, and what happens is now that postdocs that are on the job market are getting with ChatGPT to write their diversity statements. So at least that way, they'll have to feel guilty about actually composing something they don't believe in. That's another policy. But you're right that not everything can be done by policy. Some things have to be done by evolutionary changes in the culture, which are difficult to engineer from the top down.
Yeah, that's when we talk about our leaders of the Canvas Community Network being experts, exemplars, and advocates, kind of in that directional way. And that's what we're really thinking about. They have the power of a professor to show young people by his or her manner in the classroom.
Yeah,
the way they go about interacting with fellow professors on that in a debate or in their writings. That's a kind of example that we hope will shine through and compete with the existing examples, the existing paradigm, the existing culture, which just seems so deadening to so many students because it just is an avoidance of conversations. It's a closing down of questions you would like to ask and know that you can ask. We hope that there could be competition in that fact.
And that is a rewarding goal. It's something where you will catch results overnight, presumably. It is as with all cultural changes, sometimes it can creep in a bit at a time, and then simply I take over. So
let me just say, for HXA, we're just watching with great interest, as many people are, with the council's activities at Harvard as you grow and develop. We're just so happy for you for having launched this, and I just want to thank you for joining me on Heterodox Out Loud today.
It's been an honor. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode of Heterodox Out Loud. Our aim, as always, is to give you an insider's view into the perils and possibilities of open inquiry in higher education. If you like this episode, don't be shy. Hit like below and subscribe. You will help us to reach more people. Also, consider subscribing to the Heterodox Out Loud on Apple Podcast or any other preferred platform. If you work in higher ed as a professor or as an administrator, please visit the HXA website and join the thousands of people from all around the world who are working to support open inquiry. Until next time, I'm John Tomasi, reminding you, great minds do not always think alike.